Do you love Christ with all of your heart?
Probably not. That's a hard stunt to pull off. And it's a hell of a demand.
Do you love your daughter with all of your heart?
Same question probably, same objection probably applies. Like, none of us are unblemished vessels. So, no.
When you change your thoughts, you change your life. This is Thoughts That Count with Poloko.
Do you believe in God? That seems like a very simple and straightforward question. But according to Jordan Peterson, it is not a simple question. It is not as straightforward as most of us think it is. I've been following Jordan Peterson for some time now, for a couple of years, and I know that this is a question that he's always had a problem with. And in a recent interview with George Jenko, he had, I think that's how you say his name, he had the same question come up and he gave a similar response, but this time around he went into it. I haven't watched the full video. I only saw a short clip where he goes into it. So I found a video here. It's about 8 minutes long. We're going to go through the video together and I'll share my thoughts with you. But let's hear what Jordan Peterson has to say about his struggle with the question, do you believe in God? And more precisely, his struggle with Christianity. Let's check it out.
There's a question you hate. And it's, do you believe in God? And I love your approach on that.
Oh, people don't know what they mean when they ask that question. So
I would love you to elaborate on that.
It's nonsensical. Well, because what people usually want, Christians do this to me mostly, what they really want is they want me to validate their theory of belief. And they don't even know they have a theory of
Wait, see, that's good. Because you see, the question, what he's saying is, when you ask, do you believe in God? What do you really mean by that? And he says, oftentimes when Christians ask this question, they're just looking to you to validate their theory of belief. And I have seen this where Christians do this with a lot of celebrities, just hoping that some celebrity will say, I believe in God. And then they can have something they can run with and say, so-and-so believes in God. But what does that really mean? Let's listen some more.
Belief, because they think what belief is obvious, and it's not obvious at all. Like, is belief your willingness to verbally assent to the reality of a set of facts? Well, that's what an empiricist would say, or a rationalist. And most Christians who ask me that question are rationalist empiricists, and they don't even know it. And so they want me to say, well, God exists the same way a table exists. And that's just not helpful. That isn't a helpful question. It's not formulated properly. And then there's many other forms of belief. So you can say one thing and do another, right? Then you might say, well, then what do you believe? Do you believe what you say, or do you believe what you did? And I mean, people are full of contradictions like that. Well, and so I would say,
I love that.
Generally speaking, what you do is a much more precise and accurate marker of what you believe than what you say. Now, if you were fully integrated, what you say and what you believed would be the same thing. But that's pretty damn rare. And people will say, well, I believe in Christ. And I think, you do you? Really?
Look at your actions.
What's the evidence for that?
Are you
moving mountains with your faith?
See, right there. And so I'm going to continue in just a moment. But right there, I think, is the heart of his struggle with the question, do you believe in God? And I think sometimes we can be very presumptuous in what we answer to the question, do you believe in God? He's talking about a form of belief that is described in the Bible. Because when remember this, when Jesus had an issue with the disciples, he told them that they lack faith. In other words, they haven't arrived at a place of belief. And I think there's something that most people don't understand about Jordan Peterson's perspective on this, because I saw a lot of comments on this particular video that are saying that he's overcomplicating a simple question, but it's not so simple. If Jesus, every single time when the disciples failed at something, he told them that it was because they were struggling to believe, and they were walking with him, by the way, they were doing life with him, they were on a journey with him. And so if he told them that it was because they were struggling to believe that they were having all of these issues that they couldn't solve, then surely you and I would have the same struggle, right? And so I really did realize that when it comes to Jordan Peterson, and particularly with this question, he had a much more in-depth perspective of the question, do you believe in God? Because right now he's saying, if you did believe, then what you say and what you do would be exactly in alignment. So, in other words, this is the last thing I'll say, then I'll play again. In other words, me sitting on this chair, if I told you that I really do believe that this chair will hold me up, but then I was hesitant to sit on the chair, then you would know that something about my belief in the fact that the chair is stable is off. I don't really believe it since I'm hesitant to sit on it. And in the same way, there are Christians who every week in and week out, they go to church, they pray about the same thing, they struggle with the same thing. And it is really just because at the core of it, they don't really believe what they claim they believe. Anyway, let's go on.
And if you're not, then you might ask, well, just how deep is your belief? Because in principle, if you have sufficient faith, then you can move mountains. And so, and is that literally the case? That's a stupid question. So
He spoke in parables, so if you knew him, you knew what he was saying.
we move mountains all the time. We use like earth moving equipment to move mountains. We can move mountains, but and to some degree, that's a manifestation of faith if you untangle it sufficiently. But when you read the biblical texts, for example, there's part of what you need to bring to bear on the stories is a bit of imagination. It's not a collection of scientific texts. That's not what it is. It's not even close to that. That's not what it is. So, and most people who say to me, do you believe in God? This question's just a trap. And the trap is, are you willing to tell me that what I believe to be the case about what I believe is true? It's like, no, because we're not coming at the question from the same perspective. So, and then people are irritated at me because they say, well, you can't question what the person means to believe. And I say, well, that's what they're doing to me. So I see absolutely no reason why turnabout isn't fair play. Do you believe in God? Do you believe in your belief? What exactly do you mean? And you're going to ask a question that there isn't a deeper question than that. That is the most intrusive possible question. And what are you just supposed to?
Hold up. When it comes to this question, and as I'm listening to Jordan Peterson, I can understand why most people say that he's overcomplicating it and they think it's much simpler than that. But I promise you, I really do understand what he means when he says that it's not as simple, right? And I do understand his question, which is, what do you mean by that? It's just that, of course, Jordan Peterson is a scholar, and sometimes he fails to meet people where they are. Sometimes he fails to meet us where we are, right? I'm not a scholar myself, so that's why I say us. But I promise you, I really do understand what he's saying, but I know that at the same time there can be a miss in terms of understanding, because it's not. It's two different perspectives, as he said. It's two people looking at the same thing from two different perspectives, from two different worlds. So I really do understand him. Let's see.
That's just something casual? It's not casual. Not in the least. What did they say? By their fruits you'll know them. Right, well, there you go. That's the right answer to that question.
I was sitting and I'm praying. I'm like, God, I know that question is pointless, right? Because obviously by your works, I know that you know that there is a creator out there and you're doing in every decision you can to not only please him.
I don't know if he's out there. Not sure exactly where he is.
Well, okay, fair. But so I was...
Sorry, this is brilliant. This is brilliant because generally when I speak and when I preach particularly, I try to explain to people that I've had an intentional effort of trying to move away from this idea that God is somewhere out there. And I think we have to be very mindful with our language, right? And that's why I love Jordan Peterson. We have to be very mindful with our language when we say things like God is somewhere out there. He's not somewhere out there. I am of the belief that if God is not within, then he is nowhere to be found. Right? If he is not in man, then he is nowhere else to be found. You can't look on a telescope and see him somewhere out there or see some trace of where he might have flew by on his way to, his paradise. It's not like that. So I love that perspective.
Praying on it,
Out there under the bed.
there's the question, and it came to me, and this is it. This is the question that I would replace that question with. And it's, do you love Christ with all of your heart?
Probably not. That's a hard stunt to pull off. And it's a hell of a demand.
Do you love your daughter with all of your heart?
Same question probably, same objection probably applies. Like, you know, none of us are unblemished vessels. So, no. Does that mean I'm not trying to? Well, I'm probably to some degree it means that. That's partly what in the Gospels Christ says, not people were calling him good, and he said
Why do you say I'm good?
That's right. There's none but God who is good. Well, you know,
But he's patronizing them.
Yeah.
Because they were patronizing him.
It's not only, he may have been patronizing them, but to a point, with a point in mind, and not only that.
See, I don't agree that when Jesus gave that response, he was patronizing them. I really don't believe that. I think that he was expressing something of the nature of the human being in relation to God. And remember, Jesus was fully man and fully God. And even though he was without sin, and even though he was still God in his human form, we related to him. When we think of Jesus in human form, we relate to him as human. When we think of him as God, we relate to him as part of the Godhead. But I don't believe that he was patronizing the people who asked this question as much as he was giving them a revelation that goes beyond our human understanding, which is that what we think is good, as Isaiah says, our righteous deeds are as filthy rags. Even our best of works don't qualify to have us be called good before God. So I don't know if I agree that he was patronizing them as much as he really was revealing a fundamental truth about the human nature and the nature of God, and raising the standard on what good is, because we have a different standard of what is good, right? Our standard of good is, you know, give someone a lift, or such a good person, or give some change to a homeless man, such a good person. We have a very low standard of what is good, and he was raising the bar on that. That's my perspective on that. But also in terms of what he asked him just before this, I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was really brilliant. Do you love God with all your heart? Probably not. Probably not. Do you love your child with all your heart? Probably not. But it doesn't mean I'm not trying. So I think that's brilliant.
My mom used to always say, the only person you should look up to is Christ and the way he moves. And he was never disrespectful. The worst thing he ever did to somebody is let them go to their own decisions. And I found that to be very powerful, because you could really take down anything in your life without being evil. To be strong is to put the armor of God on, from my perspective, right? Another man might not see that. But the armor of Christ, it's actually pretty magnificent when you put it to the test.
What do you mean?
I believe that when we encounter evil, it's never the human, it's the spirit. And I believe that when we deal with people, we want to use emotions instead of like logic. And for me, the Bible verse says, be angry, but sin not. He obviously knows you're going to be angry, but how are you going to deal with it? And then how you deal with it will outcome where you go from that point. I believe my God to be a good father. So if I'm asking him for me to be a mighty man, and a man that could help my family, that could provide, that could put on these cameras and open up people's hearts, you don't think he's going to put me to a test that could make me explain to people how to get out of their situations? You're going to have to be put in a very hard circumstance for you to get out of it. But that's what you prayed for. So for example, when I moved on to do this show, the one challenging dilemma that I had was forgiveness. And as a Christian, that should be the easiest thing in the world. But
Well, forgiveness is difficult.
It's very difficult. And how I stumbled upon it is,
Well, it's difficult partly because it's not easy to understand the preconditions under which it's appropriate.
Could you elaborate?
Well, you can't give forgiveness away casually.
It has to be asked. You can't just give it to somebody who hasn't asked. Is that what you mean by that? Like somebody's wronged you, but you can't forgive them until they asked. Is that what you meant by that?
Usually, say in the context of a relationship, look, if someone hurt you in the past and they're out of your life, there are practices that you might undertake to free you of the burden you might still be carrying because of their betrayal. But in the context of an ongoing relationship, it's very difficult and likely inappropriate to forgive without understanding. I mean, the process of forgiveness, say, among Catholics, Christians in general, but we'll stick with the Catholics for now, is, well, you have to confess, then you have to repent, then you have to atone. Like, there's a process.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm having a fight with my wife, let's say, or vice versa, and we're coming across an issue that's really quite sticky, and maybe there's some betrayal, real or imagined, involved, we have to get to the bottom of things. We have to sort out what happened. We have to set it straight, and then we both have to swear not to have that happen again. And then you can forgive and move on. But it's not like whitewash. It's not like you can paint over a situation. You have to deal with it.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I think on that, even when George asked the question, I had a bit of a disagreement there, because I don't believe that forgiveness is something that is given on the condition that people have to ask. Because think about how many people in your life have never apologized for the wrong that they did. Think about people who are not even aware that they wronged you. Or think about people who just refused to apologize. Does that mean that you carry the pain and the bitterness for the rest of your life? I don't really think so. The best definition of forgiveness that I ever read was from Joseph Murphy, I believe, and he said forgiveness means to give for. So in other words, I give my bitterness, I give my resentment, I give the negative emotions that I carry because of what you did to me in exchange for the peace that can be mine, for the joy, for those positive emotions that I couldn't have while I was holding on to that bitterness. And so I don't really believe that forgiveness is something that has to be earned, that has to be asked. I do believe that reconciliation requires some kind of apology in order for reconciliation to take place, but I can forgive and not reconcile. And that's absolutely okay. But this was incredibly informative. I think Jordan Peterson is brilliant. I want you to share your thoughts in the comment section. There's a lot of people who disagreed with the way he answered this, even people who say they love his work. They say that he's overcomplicating this, but I personally don't really think so. I really do understand his stance, and I do understand his perspective on this. And in the same way that he's saying it, I don't think it's as simple to say it. But do you believe in God? Is it as simple as we say it is? What is your understanding of the question? Do you believe in God?
When you change your thoughts, you change your life. This is Thoughts That Count with Poloko.